Okay, so this is the after topic for episode 15. So we kind of ranted on about the ABC continuously for like 30 minutes, which is great. But
Boo, ABC.
yeah,
Go on.
boo. ABC.
Uh,
But however,
although I
I
have,
so
yeah, it
yeah.
was just Zeeve's opinion that annoyed me, so I constantly
Okay.
had to yell at him.
Well,
But it
I'm an evil ABC loving lefty, Tim. What can I say?
anyway,
Nice.
the
Yeah.
point is, some of the other topics we wanted to talk about were the other big things going on in the world. So mainly to do with what's happening with the courts. So in America, there have been two major rulings. I can't remember the name for the Obamacare one. What was it? Something versus Hill.
Hang on, I'll bring it up. It was King versus Burwell.
Yeah, wow. What the hell was Hill from then? Okay, so King versus Burlow. So that's an interesting case in the sense that the entire contention was put forward by I can't remember the name of the group. Is it the Competitive Enterprise Institute?
I
So
don't know. Institute for Justice?
no, it was. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
it was. Yeah,
Competitive Enterprise
Competitive
Institute.
Enterprise Institute.
Yes, I
Yeah, it
know
was.
my American think tanks. So yeah, so this it was an interesting case. So basically, the Obamacare law, the Affordable Care Act, says something along the lines of states shall set up a the state shall set up a healthcare agency.
Exchange.
Yeah.
Exchange, healthcare exchange. So it's quite explicit in the word the state, right?
Yes. And in
Now,
the American context, the state is not a reference to the United States. It's a reference
concerns
to,
to states, actual states.
yeah,
Yeah,
as in
and,
New
yeah,
York, Wyoming.
yeah, and it's done that way because the original Constitution
Is
of the
Wyoming a
United
state
States,
or is it a city? Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Wyoming is a state, I believe.
Yeah.
It's a state. It's a state.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Go
I
on.
was just sitting there going like, I'm pretty sure I've flown over it. It's a state. Anyway,
Yeah.
so forget geography for a second. But the
Yes.
point is, right, the state refers specifically to a state.
Yes.
It's everywhere there in their constitution, so it seemed
Yes.
like a pretty obvious thing. But Obamacare, basically, when states opted out, the federal government decided to step in and
And create a federal exchange,
Correct.
which is in the legislation. What's not in the legislation is the tax credits that the states receive if they set up exchanges, rather that individuals receive when they use state exchanges. So
Bingo.
if you're an individual living in a state that hasn't created an exchange and you sign up to the federal exchange, the question is, do you get a tax credit? And that is the issue that came up in this litigation. And
Can
the
I-
courts said, go on.
Well, can I just add, not only do you get a tax credit, but it also triggers penalties. So
No, it triggers penalties if you don't get it.
no. Let me just make, because Michael Cannon, I've listened to a lot of Michael Cannon from the Cato Institute talk about it. If there's no exchange, if there's no exchanges, and you don't get those subsidies, essentially, like the employer, there's a reduction in the employer mandate. There's no individual mandate, so it's actually like the law sets it up. It's dependent on receiving the subsidies, triggers all these other requirements under the law. So essentially, when the state started opting out of providing an exchange, they were also opting out of forcing employers to pay taxes, all these taxes and all these other requirements. So there's also elements of that where essentially, that was also a big part of it. And essentially you can opt out of Obamacare almost entirely by the states not creating an exchange.
Yep. So, so basically there was a whole bunch of stuff there. There's a lot of technical discussion here. But the wording that they got around... Sorry, the wording was essentially over the... the entire debate was over the words, the state. And, legal scholars across America from both sides were basically saying, yeah, this seems to be a pretty big cock-up on Obama's part. Like, they shouldn't have really done this, etc., etc., etc. But the SCOTUS has invented
The Supreme Court of the United States of America. Go on.
Yeah, SCOTUS. Sorry. That's me not recognizing that people aren't familiar with all acronyms.
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, so the Supreme Court, for some reason, well, not for some reason, but decided to invent like this. It's not the first time they've done something like this, but they basically said something that goes.
Well,
The federal government intended for things to become more affordable, so where there is ambiguity, we have to interpret it in favor of what the government intended.
Right.
Which I think is
Mind
the
you,
language.
yes, mind you, the Act doesn't actually make healthcare more affordable at all. It increases business costs, which makes and increases the cost of providing insurance by insurers, which in turn just makes the system more unwieldy. But that's another issue. Which you could say, I suppose, that militates against the federal government's interpretation. But leaving that aside, I mean, a lot of the debate over constitutional law is about whether you're meant to take the originalist interpretation or a
Living,
purposive or a living
living
constitution
constitution.
interpretation. People don't often realize, but the same thing, the same debate can happen when you're interpreting what's called statute law, which is ordinary laws introduced by Parliament. Because the Constitution is just a statute at the end of the day. It might be regarded as the ultimate document, but it's just a statute as far as lawyers are concerned. And you might say
It's the first statute. It's the highest statute.
it's the highest statute. But the Affordable Care Act is similarly just a statute, and you might say perhaps that the court is engaging in a bit of after the fact filling in of the statute, or you could say that they're taking a very broad purposive approach and saying, well, that was what they meant to do, so let's just say it was in there. And whether that's what they really intended to do is another matter. But at least they're not saying that it's compulsory to read the Act this way. That's a good that it's compulsory to have the Act this way. They're not saying everyone has a constitutional right to the Act as it stands. Congress could turn around and amend it or repeal it anyway.
They're just saying that that SCOTUS won't invalidate it based on this technicality.
Yes.
Yeah. So based on this reasoning, I went like, so hang on, if there's warrantless wiretapping in the Patriot Act, right? Could we have made the assumption that, hey, the government didn't intend for it to break the Constitution, didn't intend to violate rights, right? Therefore, only a patriot would, patriots would support it. Therefore, the Patriot Act should have stood. You can make all sorts of arguments like this. Like, the point is, like
I think that it's the political talking about the decision in the political sense. It would have been highly controversial for a Supreme Court to invalidate a president's signature policy while he was in office.
Yep,
that's true.
And so that is part that would have weighed in to some of the decision, and which is why a lot of people think that Justice Roberts always came down in favour of Obamacare.
That's fair enough. So the other ruling that happened during it was actually
quite recently.
Both of them happened on Friday, didn't they?
No, the Thursday was the Obamacare decision. The Friday was the same-sex marriage ruling.
Cool, thanks. So on Friday, yes, so you've ruined the surprise, but yeah, same-sex marriage. Not that it was much of a surprise. But same-sex marriage. So for me, this was a bit of a surprise, actually. So as much as I'm a fan of same-sex marriage, I did not think that SCOTUS would rule in this way.
No, it was entirely predicted that this would happen because
Really?
or during the oral arguments, the
no, wait. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I that's right. I remember viewing this. Yeah, I read the submissions and I went, oh crap, I can't believe it. So I think at one stage So what's the side on this that was anti-gay marriage? How were the sides, plaintiff and defendant, or?
Plaintiff was pro-gay marriage and
defendant was against it. Okay, so
it was, from what I understand, was that this was because most of the circuit courts, they kept striking down same-sex marriage bans, but there was one circuit appellate court that actually upheld a same-sex marriage ban, and so they appealed to the Supreme Court to get that decision overturned, and the Supreme Court agreed to hear that case, and that is what.
And I've come upon a summary from McSweeney's, which is a very amusing internet site, of the decision, the SCOTUS marriage decision in haiku. And I feel that we should inject a little bit of that in there because it actually is quite a fair summary of the case.
Go. Say it.
So Kennedy's majority decision, hark, love is love and love is love is love. It is so ordered. That's his legal reasoning. And then we come to the dissents. Scalia's dissent. You're not a poet, Kennedy. And by the way, democracy's dead. That's Scalia.
That is classic Scalia.
So that's Scalia basically saying this whole love and dove and all of that nonsense, it's got nothing to do with the Constitution. The Constitution is just a simple document for that deals with various powers that the federal government have. It was made in the 1700s, and if you want to change it, you just enact another provision in the Constitution. You go through the amendment process. Please, let's stop all this love is love nonsense. Then we have Thomas's dissent, which is liberty. This word. I do not think Locke means what you think it means, sire. So basically, this is going back to Kennedy's decision. And what Kennedy's saying is it's the right to gay marriage, if you will, is an essential aspect of liberty. The right to live your life as you so choose. And that's why everyone should be allowed to be gay married. And Thomas's dissent is basically telling people, look, guys, hold on. That's not what liberty means. Liberty means being free to do your own things in your own time. It's not something the government gives you. It's just you going about your life, right?
So,
he's saying marriage as a legal institution is a privilege that the government is conferring on you. And so he's saying, go on.
So I immensely disagree with that, and this has always been my problem with like the libertarian, well, not the libertarian, but like the liberty arguments for why gay marriage shouldn't be allowed. I'm just like, hang on, how is it more pro-liberty to deny people franchise, or rather deny people access to a particular franchise in
I think because it's based on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Yes.
So I think how you can justify it is that if the government is going to provide a service, marriage, it shouldn't discriminate on
which is not exactly the reasoning that Roberts adopted, but that's the strongest case for it. Kennedy. That's the strongest case for it. The government is granting a privilege to a certain group of people. They're heterosexual. Why not give the same privilege to other people? There's no rational reason to discriminate between the two. Ergo, that's why it should be same-sex as well as heterosexual. And to clarify, by the way, this is not saying
churches should be forced.
Yes, that churches should be forced. It is saying that marriages between states should be recognised, and same-sex marriages more broadly should also be allowed on a mandatory basis in all the states, as I understand it as well.
It was mentioned that because the judgment mentioned religious liberty, that it was consistent Hobby Lobby decision a few months back, and so the Supreme Court has consistently stated that religious liberty is important.
Okay. Anyway, so we've also got Alito's dissent. Happiness is not the point of marriage, fools. It's babies. He was.
Yeah, I found that. So I found there were a whole list of submissions that I found on the day that this released. Day that this decision was released. And I remember looking at it, going like, "Why the fuck are half the submissions about why marriage is about child rearing?" And I'm just sitting there going like, "Hang on, for the vast majority of human history, right? People were not in monogamous relationships, right? They were in polygamous or polyamorous societies, right? Like this entire monogamy thing is actually quite new. And by new, I'm talking fall of the Roman Empire kind of knew. Right?
Okay.
The Romans were sort of freaking famous for their orgies. Uh,
Right.
yeah. And marriage contracts were completely different back then, right? They were wholesale trade exchanges. So it was like you would acquire someone for breeding purposes, and you would trade for some. You would trade to her father for some, for that right, essentially. I digress, though. I don't want to make this a point about historical marriage. My point is, right, we don't stop sterile couples from marrying.
No.
So I don't
The point
understand where
is
this.
that marriage is a commitment between people and not a no more than that, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot of
look, with like submissions to cases such as these, they get all types of replies like that.
I just
I
did,
mean,
but more than I'd say. So on just the first page,
yeah.
more than half of the um, submissions for anti-gay marriage there were about this particular issue. They said it was about babies.
Well, look, I suppose
it's an easy
partly.
emotional argument to make. That's why they probably that's probably most prominent.
The thing is, I mean, marriage. We've got to make a distinction between marriage as a social institution and marriage as a legal institution, I guess. Which probably goes to what Thomas was it Thomas? No, sorry. Yes, Thomas's dissent.
Clarence Thomas. Yeah.
If you view marriage as a private commitment between yourself and your partner, it doesn't really matter what the government thinks of it, or whether the government says you have to be straight or gay or
just the
anything.
libertarian position. I mean, the libertarian
Yeah.
position is against state recognition of marriage.
Yeah.
But I've never. Sorry, I'm drifting here. I've never seen where it goes from that, right? Like, if you want to present that argument was perfect to present 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Now the snowball's already rolled, right? You're now at this point where so many places have gay marriage. You've either got to expand the franchise out, or you've got to let more people in, right? Or you've basically got to say we're shutting these people out because we just don't feel comfortable with them being in our franchise.
I don't know.
Well, there's
there's a proposal for civil unions apparently emerging from the liberal conservative backbench. That's the chatter. I don't know whether
too late, way too late.
maybe.
Way
But,
too late.
it'll be interesting with this ruling by the Supreme Court whether the red states now will try and nullify all their marriage licenses
No,
to just not issue marriage
Refuse
licenses
to
anymore
recognise
to
them.
get at.
So
that's possible.
that's a problem in America. It's not a problem here. So we have some. So essentially, in Australia already, the de facto marriage license, the de facto marriage.
Yeah.
So de facto marriages basically have the same privileges as a licensed marriage. So in Australia, you could just say, the Marriage Act is hereby repealed, right? It's not going to have that much of an effect because everybody effectively then switches from being a married couple to, hey, that's
De
not
facto.
my wife, that's me de facto.
Yeah. Thank you for that beautiful Australian accent there, because we couldn't have done without it. You call that a wife? This is a wife. Go on.
No, can you imagine anything more insulting to say? It's like, that's not me wife, that's me de facto. Like, seriously, it's just like, oh, it sounds terrible.
Right.
I digress though. I don't care if Q&A is starting. I don't want to watch Q&A. Would you want?
But,
do you want to watch Q&A, or do you want to sit here and like talk about stuff that matters?
But something more explosive could happen. It's
Okay, see, this is how they sucker you in.
Yes. And Lee is
know,
bad, and you should feel bad. Lee is saying this from beyond the reach of in
Yeah.
spirit and in writing.
No, but
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, so let's say these conservative backbenchers in the Liberal Party want to push for civil unions now. So they finally realized that opposing on religious grounds is a failed argument.
Yes.
It means they finally realized that it's a little bit bigoted to keep people out of this, simple franchise. And now you're basically arguing for different but equal. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's way too late. You could have made that argument 10 years ago, right? And it probably would have flied. But Yeah, it's right now. You're just going to look like a douchebag.
Well, I think it was Morrison and Radek who said that maybe we could privatize marriage. They sort of mentioned it in.
It's so it's actually too late for that too, right? That was my position 5 years ago, right? And I think politically, right, even like so from a libertarian perspective, I'm always going to hold that privatized marriage position,
Mm.
right? But I, I I know enough about the political economy to know that that argument's not going to fly anymore either, right?
It's not going to
Essentially,
convince people. I
it's
don't know.
I
Maybe.
no. So effectively now, if you offer that as a solution, right, it's going to look like the immediate sort of retort to that is going to be so now that you're forced to share the toy, you're going to throw the toy away.
Well, no, the thing is, it depends on who's putting that view forward. If libertarians put that view forward, then they're not really suffering that.
No,
Certainly, if
but
conservative
conservatives,
liberals are, yeah, maybe that
yeah,
will be what they will have to suffer for it.
yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what's going to happen because they're the ones that are going to push for this. The
But if
moderates,
libertarians all got together and combined their voice, they could certainly move the yeah, okay.
no,
Never
so
mind. Keep going.
this is always this has always pissed me off, right? So libertarians always have like these great suggestions. Well, not really great suggestions, but like these more ideologically consistent suggestions for how things should work, and they're usually dismissed up until this point, right? This point right here,
Yes.
where conservatives are about to lose the debate, right?
Mm.
They go like, "Oh, hang on, there was this, libertarian suggestion that we said
Mm.
was too extreme 10 years ago. Maybe we
Yeah.
should propose that now."
Yes.
Um,
Then we should grasp that opportunity. Then.
Yes, we should. We should. At least it'll be a brief moment in which to push the message.
That,
Um,
that that's why I mentioned before about how the red states might reply to the Supreme Court ruling that we could get marriage privatization in quite a few US states.
I think there's a couple who, or one or two that have already done that. At least
yeah,
one.
so Alabama has done that.
Alabama.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
well,
there was
yippee-ki-yay. I don't even know if that's
That is not Alabama. Anyway,
I'm just
Alabama's the slow talking state.
okay.
Anyway, it's the home of Clinton.
Hmm.
I digress.
Isn't it Arkansas?
Oh,
yeah,
shit. The
Arkansas.
other A state.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, my bad. Alabama's the other slow state then.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
George Wallace is from
George.
Alabama.
All right. Moving right along from this
Yeah,
Alabama dispute. Go
so
on.
speaking of things that are slow, climate change, the ever-present threat. So, in is it Holland? Is that where Amsterdam is?
Yes,
Okay,
it's
so
Holland, Netherlands,
yeah, Netherlands,
Dutch place.
the Dutch place. Yeah, because I was just gonna I was gonna say the Amsterdamish. Anyway, so I digress. So Amsterdam, not Amsterdam, sorry, the Dutch recently sued their own government
Mm.
uh, on not taking action on climate change. Actually, it was like 800 people managed to sue their government, and I think they've got to now reduce emissions by 25% or something like that, which was just hilarious to watch. So I was surprised that this court case could even happen, right? So firstly, what it's effectively arguing is that it doesn't matter what the legislature comes up with, right? If a bunch of concerned citizens can go to the judiciary, you can sort of, it's basically the pinnacle of judicial activism. You can write laws literally from the courts, which
Oh, it's kind of like an Aaron Brockovich situation.
Although, no, Erin
Well,
Brockovich didn't seek a rewrite of the judicial system.
No.
As I understand it, it was a simple tort case. She presented evidence and won. I mean, that's not Erin
Well,
Brockovich. Yeah,
no, yeah, Aaron Brockovich presented evidence.
it was a negligence case, no more.
It was a negligence case in line with the Environmental Protection Act of the time, and not just that, but I think substantial parts of that ruling have since been, what's the word for it? But where additional findings have come that there was some just dodgy evidence provided by her firm and all of that stuff.
Wow, it may well be, but that's
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No, I'm I just remember someone having this discussion on my Facebook wall where I was going on about, how torts have done more for the environment, and someone pointed out that Aaron Brockovich's case was built on flimsy evidence and all this other shit. Is my video?
Yeah, I think your video's cut off, Vickers. Also you, Tim, for ages. I didn't say anything, but I'm pretty sure.
You can still hear me though?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, there I am.
Yeah. Okay, Tim's coming back eventually, I presume. And I think Vickers is...
No, I'm here. I've been here the entire time.
Yeah, no, you have been. Your video is...
So my video had frozen. No, it's not the point. Anyway, so
once it was both of you, I figured, okay, there's something going on here. I figured,
yeah.
say something.
I digress. Anyway, so the point is essentially writing law from courts, right? That's not something that's happened before. So tort law can have the effect of basically forcing companies to regulate themselves.
But at least it's localized regulation.
Correct.
In the sense of it's a specific problem presented with specific evidence about a specific issue for a specific company in a specific time and place. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a catch-all a catch-all regulation that applies to every single person in the same industry in the same way. It just means that there's an issue out there that needs to be addressed, which is, I think, a much better way of doing it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's much better than the alternative, which is very much a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to stop ranting.
No. You were spot on. So essentially, in this case, it's basically a judicial rewrite. Basically, I assume that this is probably the equivalent of the Greens in Holland. And based on recent elections, they might have had people that came in who weren't as big, big on pro-green policies. Hang on, let me just find it. I just wanted to. Dutch rudder. I'm not sure that's good for this show, but yeah. If you don't know what a Dutch rudder is, I suggest you Urban Dictionary it.
Dutch what now?
Dutch rudder.
Rudder. Okay. Well, moving right along from that, what point are you getting at, Vickers?
Oh, basically, I was just saying it's a complete rewrite of it's a complete rewrite of what we have an
very substantial policy decision by a court, and certainly something you wouldn't expect a court to do unless you had a very activist view of what courts should do. Look, that just goes into the separation of powers debate and kind of goes into questions about what courts should do, what legislatures should do, and so on. I don't know if there's a fixed answer to that question, but I certainly seem to think this judge has gone too far. But yes, it kind of also depends on which whether you're the face or the boot, so to speak. I mean, suppose this judge were instead to say, well, this whole global warming thing is a nonsense, and that it's a waste of time to spend any money on it at all, and the government should stop doing that immediately. Would we be cheering, or would we be as concerned as we are now?
I'd be pretty concerned.
I'd be concerned, yes, but I'd be at least satisfied with the outcome of less spending on global warming. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I'm more for decisions being made by legislatures rather than the judiciary, which is why, going back to the ruling on same-sex marriage, I didn't like the fact that was decided by the courts and not the people.
Well,
I mean-
I'd have to say, across history, most of the decisions that have yielded in pro-liberty outcomes have not been done by democratic means, right? And the only one I can think of, right, which was done by democratic means, was giving women the vote, right?
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, giving women a vote happened by a majority vote. People voted for it. People voted for people who would vote for that as a policy, right? Universal suffrage. And as a result, it got up. It got up as a popular political position. Everything else, though, so slavery was largely destroyed by fiat, by the British government, by British Empire, right?
Mm.
Or the American Civil War by the Union fiat, right?
All right. Folks, I have to step out. It is getting a bit late,
Oh
but
yeah.
I invite you to
Actually,
continue on.
no. Actually, I just realized it is really late right now. So
Mm.
I think we
Yeah.
should turn it off. So
All right.
and we're also way
I'm
off.
zonked out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll call it. I don't
Yes.
know. I'll leave the editing decisions to Lee, but Lee can probably go and see when we started droning off and probably cut it. So this might not even end up being in the show.
All right. Well, I wish you all a good night. So
See you.
long.
Bye.
See ya.